Hey, shalom, 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 everybody. Great to be with you. We are in Leviticus 21 through 24. Great stuff, as always, right? I mean, there's just so many nuggets that the Lord has put in there for us to dig through. So I'm excited to get into it. I want to remind you, you can get the app. You're going to love it. It's got great stuff, Bible reading plan. It's got a audio Bible. They'll read it to you, which is pretty cool. You can give through the app. You can also download books that are there for you to enjoy on the app and more. So check that out. If you're going to be in the area in for Shavuot, for the Feast of Pentecost, we are going to be doing baptisms at Golden, the city of Golden. We're going to go do some inner tubing, and we'll do some baptisms as well. And so do check that out. Okay, let's get started. I'm looking forward to this. Is going to be great. Always amazing stuff. Let's dig in. So here we go. So, and the Lord spoke to Moses, and the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, none shall defile himself for the dead among his people." All right. So the first thing here is he's talking to Aaron and his sons. It's not a general thing to the general population of Israel. That's really important to understand. So he shall not defile himself for the dead among his people, except for his relatives who are nearest to him, his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, and his brother, also his virgin sister who is near to him, who has had no husband, for her he may defile himself. All right, so remember when Jesus is telling the story of the Good Samaritan, right? The first that comes by is a priest, and he doesn't stop, right? Quite possibly this is based what Jesus was talking about was based on this verse, right? That he's not to defile himself for the dead among his people, with these exceptions. All right, so that's just a little caveat. Otherwise, he shall not defile himself, being a chief man among his people, to profane himself. They shall not make any bald place on their heads, nor shall they shave the edges of their beards, nor make any cuttings in their flesh. They shall be holy to their God, and not profane the name of their God. For they offer the offerings of the Lord made by fire, and the bread of the Lord of their God. Therefore they shall be holy. All right, so if you're a priest, you've got a different assignment altogether, right? You're not part of the general population, but you have to act differently. Now, let's understand that while we are called to be priests in the sense, right? He's going to make a nation of priests. We are not the sons of Aaron, right? That is something that is very particular. So sometimes I think I've heard people use this and say, well, I'm supposed to be a priest. I'm like, well, no, like you're not, right? We have a high priest, that's Jesus. Otherwise, if you're one of the sons of Aaron, that's a different issue. But for the rest of us, these things are not talking to us. This is what God gave to the sons of Aaron. And they shall not take a wife who is a harlot or a defiled woman, nor shall they take a woman divorced from her husband, for the priest is holy to his God. Again, the priest has to have this special consecration. Therefore, you should consecrate him, for he offers the bread of your God. He shall be holy to you. For I, the Lord, who sanctify you, am holy. Right. So this guy is acting on behalf of you, right? This priest, he's got to be holy because I am holy, right? He's got to be set apart. He's not the average dude. The priest, the daughter of any priest, if she profanes herself by playing the harlot, she profanes her father, she shall be burned with fire. Now that seems awfully harsh, right? But again, understanding what is entailed here. Now, what we learn in the book of Joshua is that they did burn Achan with fire, but what did they do first? They stoned him. All right, so that almost certainly was the practice here. Like, I don't see anywhere in scripture where you have burning alive, which I think is a hideous and terrible practice that the church did in the name of Jesus, which I think is just absolutely terrible, right? But you see that first the person was stoned, right? Because that's pretty fast. I can't say if it's relatively painless. It probably isn't, but at least it's fast, okay? So that's the good news. Whereas burning alive is a very torturous and slow process. All right, so first, probably stoned, then burn. He who is the high priest among his brethren, on whose head the anointing oil was poured, and he who is consecrated to wear the garments, shall not uncover his head, nor tear his clothes, nor shall he go near any dead body, nor defile himself or his father or his mother. Now, this is interesting. What did the chief priest do when Jesus said, I am the Son of Man and all coming on the clouds of heaven, right? What did he do? He tore his clothes, right? The high priest was supposed to tear his clothes, and yet he did, which leads to an interesting question. Did that somehow defile him? Well, it certainly did defile him, I would say. Could it have somehow made him unfit for office? Well, possibly. I don't know. It's an interesting question, but he certainly defiled himself by doing that, right? Because it says, nor shall go near any dead body, nor defile himself for his father and mother. So any of these actions is a way that the high priest would defile himself, which is interesting. Perhaps when he did that, when he defiled himself, by, in a sense, disqualifying himself from that role of being high priest, could that have provided an opportunity for Yeshua to become the high priest? It's just something to think about. It's really hard to get into the nitty-gritty of that, but it seems like it possibly could. All right. And my good friend Ed Doss pointed it out to me, so I appreciate that. All right. So, nor shall he go out of the sanctuary, nor profane the sanctuary of his God, for the consecration of the anointing oil of his God is upon him. I am the Lord. This is a pretty serious job. And he shall take a wife in her virginity, a widow or a divorced woman or defiled woman, or a harlot. These he shall not marry, but he shall take a virgin of his own people. All right. So what does this tell you? That it was possible, right, for the average Israelite to marry a widow, or to marry a divorced woman, or to marry a defiled woman, or even a harlot, right? And of course, that's what Hosea was called to do, was to marry a harlot, right? And God's like, hey, I want you to understand what's going on here. That's kind of like what Israel is to me, is what Gomer, your wife, is to you, right? So only the exception is if you're a son of Aaron, if you're a priest, not a high priest, but a priest, then you're not allowed to have these kinds of unions. Otherwise, these are permissible, right? And so that is certainly something to consider. Nor shall he profane his posterity among his people, for I, the Lord, sanctify him. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron, saying, no man of your descendants in succeeding generations who has any defect may approach to offer the bread of his God. For any man who has a defect shall not approach, a man blind or lame who has a marred face or any limb too long, a man who has a broken foot or a broken hand, or who is a hunchback or a dwarf, or a man who has a defect in his eye, an eczema or scab, or is a eunuch. No man of the descendants of Aaron, the priest, who has a defect shall come near to offer the offerings made by fire to the Lord. He has a defect. He shall not come near to offer the bread of his God. Now, again, sometimes you can read these things and say, well, this seems so unfair. Understand that these people were technicians that were going into God's nuclear furnace, if you will, and it was a very specialized job and a rather dangerous job. Remember Nadav and Abihu, right? So you can't just have anybody go in there. It's kind of like we don't just send anybody to space, right? To be an astronaut, you have to meet certain physical requirements. And sorry, some people are going to be disqualified because the job entails that you are able to do certain functions. And if you're a quadriplegic, well, I'm very sorry, but to be an astronaut, you need working limbs, right? Because you need to do stuff in space with those limbs, right? So that's just an analogy of how you could be disqualified from something in our world, and this is the same idea. Again, because he's doing something very specialized. He may eat the bread of his God, both the most holy and the holy. Only he shall not go near the veil to approach the altar, because he is a defect, lest he profane my sanctuaries, for I, the Lord, sanctify him. And Moses told it to Aaron and to his sons and to all the children of Israel. All right, so now everybody knows, but again, this only applies to specifically the sons of Aaron. All right, chapter 22. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and his sons, that they separate themselves from the holy things of the children of Israel, and that they do not profane my holy name, by what they dedicate to me. I am the Lord. Say to them, whoever of your descendants throughout your generations who goes near the holy things which the children of Israel dedicate to the Lord, while he has uncleanness upon him, that person shall be cut off from my presence. I am the Lord. Now, again, this term being cut off is not crystal clear. It's unlikely that it means death. All right, so it's unlikely that it means death because we're told in other places that this person shall be put to death. So it seems pretty simple that God can just say that someone should be put to death, right? So to be cut off is something else. It probably it's a form of being ostracized, that you're cast out of the community, and it could be that it's only for a certain amount of time, right? So it's not absolutely clear how long this would have lasted. But we think about Miriam. So Miriam was talking trash against her brother. And what happened to her? She got leprosy, and she had to then go outside of the camp for 7 days, right? Until she was healed and cleansed of that. And then she could come back into the people. So she was cut off from God's people, but not permanently, right? So again, there's a little bit of discussion and question as to how long would this have lasted. I'm afraid I don't have the answer to know how long somebody would have been cut off. But what we get a sense here is that whoever of your descendants throughout your generation who goes near the holy things, right? This person is cut off, right? So I just read that. Whatever man of your descendants of Aaron who is a leper or has a discharge shall not eat the holy things until he is clean. So that again seems to underscore that idea that you're cut off until you are somehow put back right. All right. So just something to think about. All right. And whoever touches anything made unclean by a corpse or a man who has an emission of semen, or whoever touches any creeping thing by which he would be made unclean, or any person by whom he would become unclean, whatever his uncleanness may be, the person who has touched any such thing shall be unclean until evening, and shall not eat the holy offerings unless he washes his body with water. All right. So again, I've talked about this before, but I think it's relatively straightforward that if you touch a dead person, guess what? That body that's decaying probably has some germs. All right. I mean, that's just how it works. All right. If you touch an emission of semen, well, that's unclean. Okay. So this isn't about a sin. This isn't an evil thing that has happened. It's just that things that come out of your body, well, they tend to be unclean. All right. And if you touch something that's dead, well, they tend to be unclean and have cooties and germs and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's what he's talking about here. And this person needs to bathe in water in order to eat the holy things, and he's unclean until evening. Now, it's not entirely clear why you have to wait until evening. Maybe this was God's way of saying, look, you need time for there to be a dissipation of whatever the germs are, right? And we know that germs dissipate over time. So that could be that it just needed time for the air to come in and some moisture to get in there and kind of wipe this thing away. That's a real possibility. So I think so much of this is just very practical. Now, I understand that we can take this and we can spiritualize it, and I can appreciate that. However, what I would suggest is that because this is a human who is doing a reenactment of the heavenly tabernacle, that there's extra precaution and extra emphasis put on the very sort of mundane aspect of this, so that what is happening on earth would be holy because what is happening in heaven is holy. And so this priest needs to do this whole thing in a very holy and clean fashion. All right. And when the sun goes down, he shall be clean, and afterward he may eat the holy things because it is his food. Whatever dies naturally or is torn by beasts, he shall not eat to defile himself with it. I am the Lord. They shall therefore keep my ordinance, lest they bear sin for it and die thereby. If they profane it, I, the Lord, sanctify them. Now, again, it's not clear if God is going to kill them if they should do this, or if you eat something that dies naturally or is torn by bees. If you consume that, if you will, then just die, because now we understand a lot about germs, that if an animal has killed another animal, well, there's all kinds of germs going on with the predator, right? And so that doesn't seem good. And if something dies naturally, well, why did it die? Probably maybe old age, or it had some sickness. And so then if you consume that, well, you're now taking that sickness that killed the animal and you're ingesting that, right? So it could be that simply doing that is what is going to do you in, right? Whether it's God directly, who's like zapping you, sort of like Ananias and Sapphira style, where they just drop dead. I don't get that impression from the text that that's what's going to happen, but rather there's going to be a natural consequence of eating this animal that died somehow. It wasn't slaughtered, but it just died for whatever reason. You shouldn't do that, right? Again, I think it's incredibly practical that we should just probably learn a few things from what God is trying to tell us. And they shall therefore keep my ordinance, lest they bear their sin. No outsider shall eat the holy the holy offering. One who dwells with the priest or a hired servant shall not eat the holy thing. All right. So just because he's giving you lodging doesn't mean you get to eat these things that have been dedicated, sanctified, and really established for God and for the work that's going on in the temple. But if the priest buys a person with his money, he may eat it, and one who is born in his house may eat his food. So if you're part of that house anyways, like that's just your domain, that's where you live, whether you're bought or you were born there, that is okay then to eat that, because you're now part of the household. If the priest's daughter is married to an outsider, she may not eat of the holy offerings. Again, because now she's no longer part of that household. Yeah, she can go back to visit daddy, but she cannot eat of those things because she now belongs to a different household. But if the priest's daughter is a widow or divorced and has no child and has returned to her father's house, as in her youth, she may eat her father's food, but no outsider shall eat it. All right, so she was married and the husband died, sadly, or she was married and that marriage did not survive. It ended in divorce. Well, so now she's going to go back to her father's house, and now she's part of that household again, right? So she can eat of that food. As long as she was part of a different household, even though she was coming home to visit her dad, she could not eat of those things. But if she's now living and dwelling and abiding in that house, then yes, she is able to eat that. And if a man eats the holy offering unintentionally, then he shall restore a holy offering to the priest and add 1/5 to it. They shall not profane the holy offerings of the children of Israel, which they offer to the Lord, or allow them to bear the guilt or of trespass when they eat their holy offerings, for I, the Lord, sanctify them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and to his sons and to all the children of Israel, and say to them, Whatever man of the house of Israel or of the strangers in Israel who offers his sacrifice for any of his vows or for any of his freewill offerings, which they offer to the Lord as a burnt offering, you shall offer of your own free will a male without blemish from the cattle, from the sheep, or from the goats. Whatever has a defect, you shall not offer, for it shall not be acceptable on your behalf. All right, so again, a free will offering is that you're just so in love with God. You're just so overwhelmed by how good he is. You want to go and say, thanks, Lord. So you're going to now make a free will offering. Well, as the word suggests, it needs to be free will. No one's pushing you into this. However, if you're going to bring something, it's got to be good. If you're going to bring something, don't bring your leftovers. Don't bring the animals that are no good and that you don't really want anyway. Well, here you go, Lord, take this, right? It's like if you're going to go visit a king or a president or a prime minister, are you going to take him or her? You're going to take something that is of low value. You're going to take kind of your leftover junk that you don't really want anyway. Like, here you go, I got you something. He's being like, well, what's this all about, right? But isn't our king all the more greater? I mean, he deserves really the best, right? And if you're doing this because God has been blessing you and you just want to say thank you, then don't take him your trash. Give him some good stuff, right? And guess what? He'll bless you even more. So don't fret it. All right. So God is now giving these different instructions as to what needs to happen. And whoever offers a sacrifice of a peace offering to the Lord to fulfill his vow, or a free will offering from the cattle or sheep, it must be perfect to be accepted. There shall be no defect in it. Now, what's interesting here about this word in Hebrew is the word tamim. All right, tamim. So you can see here that this is talking about an animal. This animal must be tamim. That is, it must be perfect, without blemish, is another way to say that. Where else do we find this word? Well, we find it in Genesis chapter 6. All right, so let me make this a little bit bigger. All right, so in Genesis chapter 6, it says concerning Noah, so Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Here's the word tamim. All right, so Noah was tamim. Now, does this mean that he was morally perfect? Well, let's think about it. Does it mean that a sheep was morally perfect or a cow was morally perfect? I don't think animals have morals, quite frankly. I don't think animals can decide if they should murder somebody or not, if they should steal or if they shouldn't, right? I don't think there are morals within the animal kingdom. That's something that seems to be exclusive to humans. So if that's the case, if it's not about morality, but it's about this whole thing that we've been reading here about being clean, then if we then take this back to Noah, where we first find this, it's probably referring to him being clean as well. And what does it mean that he was clean? Did he never touch a dead body or something like that? Probably not, right? Again, this, if you look at how it's used of the animal itself is clean. The animal is without blemish, right? It doesn't have warts or cuts or scrapes or missing an eye, right? Somehow it could have something to do with the genetics, right? It's good health. So Noah is healthy, right? Now, when we go back and we see what we just, the whole preface of Genesis chapter 6 is, when now it came to pass when man began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born to them, and that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose, right? And then we see that there were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. So it sounds like this is not about, that's not a moral issue, but perhaps a genetic issue. Now, look, it says that the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. There's clearly a lot of bad morality going on. There's no question about that. However, if we keep going, I think this is super important. He says that he's going to destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and creeping things, bird, and all these different things, right? Because, I'm going to get down to verse 11, the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence, all right? And verse 12 nails it. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth, right? So the corruption of the flesh is really the antithesis to Noah being tamim in his generation. All right. So again, this almost certainly has to do with a genetic issue. And of course, that's what the argument I make in Corrupting Image, Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. All right. So if you've been wondering, I encourage you to check out those books. You can now get the audiobooks, by the way, which I think you're going to love. Let me read the book to you instead of reading it yourself. I'll read it, right? So you can go to my website, douglashamp.com, and get the Corrupting the Image Volume 1, 2, or 3 audiobook, or you can go to Amazon. You can get it there, or you can go straight to Audible as well to get the books there. All right, moving on. So let's go back to our text in Leviticus 22. All right. So we see that it must be without blemish. Whatever has a defect, you shall not offer it, for it shall not be acceptable on your behalf. All right, so he's told us all these things, and then he tells us what things cannot be taken, right? So those that are blind or broken or maimed or have an ulcer or eczema or scabs, you shall not offer to the Lord, nor make an offering by fire of them on the altar to the Lord, right? Now, you can eat these things, right? If you just want to have it for dinner, that's fine. But if you're going to bring it to God, well, that's a whole different thing altogether. Either a bull or lamb that has any limb too long or too short, you may offer as a free will offering, but for a vow, it shall not be accepted. You shall not offer to the Lord what is bruised or crushed or torn or cut, nor shall you make any offering of them in your land, nor from a foreigner's hand shall you offer any of these as the bread of your God, because their corruption is in them and defects are in them. They shall not be accepted on your behalf. All right. So again, the whole idea of corruption, right? That's the same thing that we saw in Genesis chapter 6, right? That there was corruption. All flesh had become corrupted. Same idea here. So again, this has to do with the health of the animal. There's something perhaps on a genetic level, certainly on a health level, that is not good. And that is what God is advising against. Okay, it's what he's saying, don't do it. Now, the Lord spoke to Moses, when a bull or a sheep or a goat is born, it shall be 7 days with its mother, and from the 8th day and thereafter it shall be accepted as an offering made by fire to the Lord. So there's a real bond, right? That any kind of mother of the animal kingdom that has a little baby, right? There's a natural instinct to care for that. And so if you take it away prematurely, that robs the mother of the opportunity to take care of her little baby, right? Whatever that may be. And I don't know if you've ever seen some of those nature videos, and sometimes where a lion comes and it gets the little baby water buffalo or something, and they show the mother afterward, and it's kind of sad. The mother is like, where did my baby go? Right? So there needs to be time for that bond, at least to have enough time so that it's healthy for the mother to then be without her baby. Whether it is a cow or ewe, do not kill both her and her young on the same day. And when you offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving to the Lord, offer it of your own free will. On the same day it shall be eaten. You shall leave none of it until morning. I am the Lord. Therefore you shall keep my commandments and perform them. I am the Lord. You shall not profane my holy name, but I will be hallowed among the children of Israel. I am the Lord who sanctifies you. Now, interesting. We're going to go over to Ezekiel chapter 39. All right, this whole idea of you shall not profane the name of your Lord in Israel. Well, this was exactly what was happening, sadly, with Israel. Okay, so he says, when I have brought them back from the peoples and gathered them out of their enemies' lands, I am hallowed in them in the sight of many nations. And they shall know that I am the Lord their God, who sent them into captivity among the nations, but also brought them back to their land and left none of them captive any longer. And I will not hide my face from them anymore, for I shall have poured out my spirit on the house of Israel. All right, so the house of Israel, right? Because what happened? He says, now I will bring back the captives of Jacob and have mercy on the whole house of Israel. And I'll be jealous for my holy name after they've borne their shame and all their unfaithfulness, in which they were unfaithful to me when they dwelt safely in their own land and when no one made them afraid. Right? So God is saying, look, you guys went out and did all these terrible things from me. You profaned my name. Right? Here again, verse 22. So the house of Israel shall know that I am the Lord their God from that day forward. Right? They sadly, and again, the house of Israel was taken into captivity by the Assyrians, right? The northern house of Israel that was taken into captivity. And so God is going to bring them back. But again, it all starts in the Torah. That is where we see all of these ideas first. And then the prophets elaborate based on the actions that Israel or Judah have been doing throughout many centuries. Okay. So, I'm the one who sanctifies you, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord. All right, verse 23. Now we come to the part of the feast, the Moedim, right? So a Moed is an appointed time. It has really two words in it. It has the word time in it, and it has the word witness, which makes perfect sense, right? Because these feasts of the Lord, they're at a time in the year, but it's also a witness of something that happened and will happen, right? So these are things that we are to remember and to look forward to. So these are God's feasts. I want to stress that these are God's feasts. These are not Jewish feasts. Have the Jews kept them, and are we thankful for what they've done? Yes, absolutely. Very much so. If they had not been keeping them, we would have forgotten them completely. But I just want to stress, they're not Jewish feasts, but these are God's feasts. And look, God himself says that. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, the feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, these are my feasts. Whose feasts are these? They're God's feasts, right? Are they Jewish feasts? No, they're God's feasts. Do the Jews celebrate them? Yes. And we're grateful for that because they have kept the heritage alive. It's very good. But they're the bottom line is that these are God's feasts. And that is the reason that I keep them. That's the reason we celebrate them at the Way Congregation, because they are God's feasts. And we just want to do what God said to do. It's really that simple. Do what God said to do. Okay. All right. He says, 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work on it. It is a Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. All right. Well, this is pretty simple. And I just had a David Wilbur on my show yesterday. If you guys missed that, I encourage you to check it out. It's called Remember the Sabbath. He wrote a book on that. You can check out his book as well. But we were talking about how the whole idea of a lunar Sabbath really doesn't make any sense, because if you can count to 7, it's pretty simple. Jesus himself was keeping the Sabbath, and he wasn't arguing with the Pharisees that you guys are keeping the wrong Sabbath. What are you talking about? Right? That never happened. And so here, this passage, 6 days work shall be done. Right? So God started his creative act on day 1, Yom Rishon. Right? He started then on the first day, and then he was creative. He was doing his malacha, which is his vocational work, if you will. And then on the 7th day, he says that Vayishbot Adonai, right? It says that, and God Sabbathed is really what that is saying. All right. So we want to do the same thing. If God worked for 6 days, then we want to also work for 6 days and then rest or Sabbath on the 7th day. And God put a special blessing on the Sabbath day. Now, I know there's people that have to work and there's different things that are going on, and maybe they can't take the Saturday, the Friday evening to Saturday evening Sabbath. Well, certainly take a day, right? But understand that the blessing of the Sabbath is on the 7th day, which is Friday night to Saturday night, right? That's just how it is. Okay. So if you're not able to do that because you have a job that requires you to work, well, I can appreciate that. But understand that the Sabbath is still the Sabbath. It doesn't matter which day you can take off. The Sabbath is the Sabbath, and it's not a personal Sabbath, right? So, if you take off Wednesdays, fine. But understand that on the 7th day, Friday night to Saturday night, that is the day that God blessed. And he put a double blessing on it. And so that is all the more reason that we really want to strive to remember the Sabbath, to guard it, to keep it, because it's worth it. All right. So don't do any work. Now, we were talking about this yesterday on the show, and we got a bunch of questions. Well, can I do this? Can I do that? Right? There's always going to be questions about, well, what can I do? Well, first of all, understand that God said that you're not supposed to do any melechet avodah, right? So there's 2 different words there. Melechet is your vocational work, and then avodah is a very general, broad word for doing or working, right? So, Jesus said that my Father is doing, or he's working, like all the time, right? He's keeping things going. Think of it like the guy that works at the nuclear power plant on Saturday. I'm glad that guy goes into his job because he needs to keep things going, and I don't want that thing blowing up and killing all of us. And so we need people there to monitor it and to keep the process going, because you can't exactly turn off, nuclear, was it fission, right? Fission. There we go. Is it splitting? Yes. Okay. So, they can't turn that off, right? So there's things that have to keep going. And that's the same idea. Now, if you can, stop your regular vocational work. And well, can I mow the lawn? Well, maybe if you find so much satisfaction and enjoyment and pleasure and relaxation in mowing the lawn, then maybe. But just be careful, because you find yourself starting to do that, and then you do something else, and before you know it, your day of rest is gone because you were getting all these chores done. Right? So be careful. If mowing the lawn is the greatest thing you could ever possibly do, then maybe that's okay. But I would just encourage you to be wise and to not squander that day, because it can go by so quickly. And really, it's supposed to be a gift, right? Jesus said that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, right? So this is a gift that God is giving you to enjoy that day. So don't squander it. These are the feasts, the Moedei Adonai. These are the feasts of the Lord, holy convocations which you shall proclaim at their appointed times. On the 14th day of the first month at twilight, or at evening, right, is the Lord's Passover, right? So this is one of the reasons, we're going to see this in a bit when we get down to Yom Kippur, that the day starts in the evening, it goes until evening. Sometimes people have that question, well, when does it really start? Is it just Jewish tradition? Well, yeah, it is tradition because it's in the text, right? So this one is in the text. And we definitely want to start that Friday evening at twilight when the sun goes down. Now, the Jews have a tradition that when you can see 3 stars, then it's officially twilight. I think it's a pretty good tradition. How else should you count it, right? I mean, when there's just a little bit of sun in the sky, why not just wait till there's 3 stars and then right? I think that's a pretty good rule. And on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread to the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. So we just came through that. I love that feast. It is just so powerful. And, I really believe that God wants us to go a week without having leaven, right? It's giving your body a break from something that's delicious, yes, but something you don't need all the time. And so this is a great way to just kind of do that little reset on your body. Plus, it has all these spiritual things that are wonderful, right? Like if leaven represents sin, then going a week without that sin in your life, well, that becomes very special. It becomes an object lesson. And really, all of these things are object lessons. They're there to teach you something. By actually doing it, you're learning a deeper truth. And the only way you can learn it is, well, by doing it, right? I can tell you about it, but once you finally do it, you'll be like, oh, that was kind of cool, right? Yom Kippur is very significant to me. I'm not wild about fasting, but when I do, I find it's a wonderful spiritual exercise to meditate on how I've blown it, how good God is, how much He loves me, and how much He's forgiven me for the times that I've blown it. And the very least that I can do is go a day without food. I mean, it's really not that hard. And remember that Jesus, He suffered on the cross to pay for my sins. And then it says that He took His own blood to the heavenly tabernacle that is not of this creation, not made with hands, and He offered His blood, right? Now, when would that have been done in the earthly temple? That taking the blood once a year happened on Yom Kippur, right? So how He does that? Well, He's God, He figures it out. But He took His blood that He had given as the sacrifice on Passover, and then somehow in the spiritual realm, which God can do, He then applied it at the proper time, or for the Moed of Yom Kippur. Now, it seems that He did that all in one weekend, which is pretty cool, but I don't know. God is God, so I'll let Him figure out how He does that kind of stuff. But that's what He did, and so He fulfilled that as well. On the first day, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work. All right, so this holy convocation probably means to get together, right? And so when we go back here on the 6th or the 7th day, it says that you shall have a holy convocation, which probably means that you are to get together, right? That's probably what that means, okay? And that's one reason I would encourage people to gather. Now, I know that during the lockdown, we had to do it on Zoom and all that, and that's fine. Or, watching a teaching on YouTube or whatever, there's a place for that. But if you can at all make a way, go to a local place so that you can be part of that holy convocation. It's super important that you would do that. Okay, moving on. But you shall offer but you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord for 7 days. The seventh day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. Again, customary work here is the word malechet avodah, right? So you're not doing your vocational work. That's what it means by customary. It's the what you do for your vocation. What is your occupation? That's what you're not doing on that day. Doesn't mean you can't hit the button on the microwave, the 30-second button on the microwave. Like that. That's just basic avodah. That's doing something. And there's not a prohibition against that. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you and reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted on your behalf. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. All right. So there's, of course, debate on when, is the day after the Sabbath, right? That's the real question. Now, the traditional Jewish interpretation is that, let's say that Passover falls on Tuesday, that would be the Sabbath. And so then the next day, Wednesday, would be the day after, and that would be first fruits. I'm of a different opinion, and I think we see this in the New Testament, and the Sadducees also held to this view, which I think is the correct one. But let's say that, again, Passover falls on a Tuesday, so the Sabbath after, the day after the Sabbath, would be what? Well, you got to wait till the Sabbath, which falls on Saturday. And then the day after that would be when? That would be the first day of the week, or Sunday. So at the Way Congregation, what we do is, doesn't matter what day of the week Passover falls on, we're always going to celebrate first fruits on a Sunday, on the first day of the week. And then we're going to start counting the Omer from that time. And Omer is basically 2 liters. It's like a small bushel. It's some kind of a basket measurement. And you would then be counting this 50 days, right? Hence Pentecost. You're counting 50 days, 49 plus 1. And then the 50th day is always going to fall on Sunday. All right. So that is, I think that's absolutely the correct way to interpret it. I know people would see it differently, perhaps, but that's what we do at the Way Congregation. So in case you were wondering, why do we do that? That is the reason. Again, there's debate about it, but that's how I'm reading it, and many others have as well. So then they would take this sheaf, right? They're bringing in the harvest. Maybe it's a sheaf of barley, right? And they would then wave it before the Lord. Hey, Lord, look, this is what you gave us, right? Thank you for that. That's what you're doing. And what is it? What is first fruits? I mean, the very name entails it, that there's more to come, right? This is just the beginning of the fruit of your labor. There's more like this to come. And who happened to rise from the dead on first fruits? Oh, I don't know. Was it Jesus, right? Paul actually talks about how Jesus is our first fruits. And then we're also told in Revelation 14 that the 144,000 of all tribes of the house of Israel, or all Israel and Judah, okay, that they will be first fruits, these 144,000. So I think that those are going to be young men who will be these first fruit types, and that they will be the first ones to get their new bodies. Now, again, some speculation there, okay, because the text isn't 100% clear as to what it means, but that's how I read it. Okay, for what it's worth, you can take it or leave it. But that's how I read it. All right. And of course, that means what Jesus was, what he was the first fruits, we're going to become like that. We're going to have these new bodies, and it's going to be awesome. Looking forward to that very much. All right. And you shall offer on that day, when you wave the sheaf, a male lamb of the first year without blemish as a burnt offering to the Lord. Its grain offering shall be 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour, mixed with oil, an offering made by fire to the Lord for a sweet aroma, and its drink offering shall be of wine, 1/4 of a hin. You shall eat neither bread nor parched grain nor fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your God. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath. So again, the day after the Sabbath, I interpret the Sabbath, as do many others, but I interpret the Sabbath as the Sabbath, right? Not a high Sabbath like Passover, which floats. It can fall on any day of the week. But the seventh day Sabbath does not float. It is fixed. And so therefore the day after the Sabbath would always be on a Sunday or the first day of the week. Okay. So you should count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. And that's how we get the 50. That's the Pentecost in Greek. Count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall offer a new grain offering to the Lord. You shall bring from your dwellings 2 wave loaves of 2/10 of an ephah. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baked with leaven. They are the first fruits to the Lord. And you shall offer with the bread 7 lambs of the first year without blemish, 1 young bull and 2 rams. They shall be as a burnt offering to the Lord, with their grain offering and their drink offerings, an offering made by fire for a sweet aroma to the Lord. Then you shall sacrifice 1 kid of the goats as a sin offering, and 2 male lambs of the first year as a sacrifice of a peace offering. The priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits as a wave offering to the Lord. With the 2 lambs, they shall be holy to the Lord for the priest. And you shall proclaim on the same day that it is a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. Now, what's interesting is that the Feast of Pentecost, or Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, we're not told specifically, other than some sacrifices, like what is the significance of this, right? First fruit seems pretty obvious, but what's this day all about, right? And well, that's one of those interesting questions. However, we do know that some things happened, very important things happened on the Feast of Shavuot, right? God took the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. That happened on Passover. Then we went into first fruits, and of course, not first fruits, but unleavened bread, then first fruits. And then we come to the time of Shavuot, which is when the children of Israel were at Mount Sinai, and God spoke to them, and they entered into a covenant agreement, a marriage contract with God. Unfortunately, that marriage didn't go so well, and it ended in a divorce for at least 10 tribes out of the 12. God said, get out, right? And then he sends Jesus in the fullness of time, and he undoes, or he dissolves completely all the obligations and debts. Sorry about that. All the obligations and debts that are associated with the first marriage, all the bad things that happen, and then he dies as the husband, and he establishes a new marriage contract. Pretty cool stuff, right? When you put it all together, right? So some very major things happened on both Pentecost, or Shavuot, even though it's not specifically stated what you're supposed to do, other than, of course, give some sacrifices. All right. And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field when you reap, nor shall you gather any gleaning from your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the stranger. I am the Lord your God. Well, again, God is always looking out for the poor. And this is a way to give alms, right? Instead of throwing money in a hat for somebody, this is a way to let them go out and keep their dignity, and to glean what is left over, right? So I encourage people, just if you have some spare change, give it, right? If you got some extra dollars lying around in your car and you see somebody in need, give them, right? God will take care of it. Maybe the person is just a big scammer. I don't know, but you can give, and God will see that you're giving. It says it says in Proverbs that when you give to the poor, you're loaning to God, right? It's like, wow, right? So he's going to repay you for giving to this person in need, right? So, even if, try to be wise, but you can't always figure it out, and just try to give when you can. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath rest, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. All right. So what's interesting is between the spring feast and the fall feast, right? You're supposed to take care of people. But then we come to the fall feast, which is interesting, right? Because Jesus did Passover, obviously. He was in the tomb for unleavened bread. He rose on first fruits. The Holy Spirit was given, and a new marriage contract was established on Pentecost. And that was pretty awesome, right? And now we're waiting for him to come back at trumpets. And in the meantime, what are we supposed to do? Take care of the poor. It's pretty awesome, right? How how God put that in there. All right, so then we come to the feast of blowing of trumpets. So this is the Feast of Trumpets, right? And I believe that this is when Yeshua is going to return. At the last trumpet, I think it all fits together quite well. And so I love celebrating the Feast of Trumpets. It's always a lot of fun, a lot of food. We're looking forward to the return of Yeshua. He fulfilled those fall feast, or excuse me, the spring feast so perfectly. It only makes sense that his return would be in conjunction with the fall feast. And I think that's the case, right? So you're not supposed to do any customary work, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, also the 10th day of the 7th month shall be the day of atonement, Yom Kippurim. Right? So this is the day of coverings. It shall be a holy convocation for you. You shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire to the Lord, right? So again, this was the time that Jesus took his own blood into the heavenly tabernacle and he offered it there on the altar. Now, again, he did that at the time that we understand, at the time of that it was in the spring, of course, right? So he must have done some, time travel or something, which, he's God, he can do that. But he then offered that, he fulfilled that as well. And you're not supposed to do any work on that same day, for it is the Day of Atonement, to make atonement for you before the Lord your God. So the least you can do when Jesus was suffering and working really hard and suffering and died, the least you can do to remember that is to take it very seriously, make it solemn, and consider your sin. Now, the Christian equivalent of that day is what we call Good Friday. Okay. And so that sense of reverence of what Yeshua did, the Christian church in general celebrates it on what they call Good Friday. And I'm okay with that. Right. But it's just too bad that they forget about this beautiful thing called Yom Kippur, right? Because that is also a very, very powerful time when we are to think about what the Lord has done for us. For any person who is not afflicted in soul on that same day shall be cut off from his people. Why? Because you're not being part of your people. How can you say you're part of this when you're not doing the thing that makes you part of this people? Right? That's the basic idea. And any person who does any work on that same day, that person I will destroy from among his people. Well, I think it's pretty clear. You shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest, and you shall afflict your souls on the 9th day of the month at evening. From evening to evening, you shall celebrate your Sabbath. Now, this is talking specifically about Yom Kippur, but the principle seems to be true for all of these, right? So that the Sabbath, or any Sabbath, is going to begin in the evening and then go until the following evening, right? So if you've never done Yom Kippur, I highly encourage you to do it. It's not that hard, right? So if you want to kind of the easy way to do it is, eat before sundown, have a good meal. You probably wouldn't eat after that. You shouldn't anyway. It's not good for your health. So, just have a good meal and then you go to bed, right? And you're not doing any work the next day. So you can sleep in a little bit, get a little bit of extra rest, all right? And then throughout your day, just be thinking about what the Lord's done for you. And you might want to go for a walk. You might want to read the Bible with some family or someone special and enjoy those times, right? And just use the time meditating. You'll be surprised. I think, remember the first time I did it, it seemed like the time went really slow. But then every time I've been doing them since, it goes faster and faster until I'm like, boy, that was fast, right? It's already over. And so it's to be a time of just thinking about what the Lord has done for you. And by afflicting, there's also a passage in, I think it's Psalm 34, I believe, where it talks about afflicting your soul and then fasting, right? So that's where we get that connection, is that we don't eat on that day. And quite frankly, most of us love to eat, right? So and as a quote unquote easy way to afflict yourself is to not eat on that day, okay? And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of the 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days to the Lord. On the first day there shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. For 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. On the 8th day you shall be a holy convocation, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord as a sacred assembly. You shall do no sacred work on it. These are the feasts of the Lord. Okay, so this let me just keep 1 second. I got all tripped up. Oh boy. All right, so here we go. All right, these are the feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, to offer an offering made by fire to the Lord, a burnt offering and a grain offering, a sacrifice and drink offerings, everything on its day. Besides the Sabbaths of the Lord, besides your gifts, besides all your vows, and besides all your freewill offerings which you give to the Lord. Also on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep the feast of the Lord for 7 days. For on the first day there shall be a Sabbath rest, and on the 8th day a Sabbath rest. And you shall take for yourselves on the first day the fruit of beautiful trees, palm branches, branches of palm trees, the boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. You shall keep it as a feast to the Lord for 7 days in the year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths for 7 days. All who are native Israelites shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. All right, this is such a beautiful time. Of course, this is called Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Booths. And you're to dwell in a booth for 7 days. All right. Now, the word dwell, it's the word yashav, and it means to sit. All right. So you could you could skate by. I think you could biblically skate by building a sukkah and going and sitting in there and having a meal. All right. I think that fulfills the requirement. However, it's a lot of fun to get together with other people and have a camp out. Right. And so that's a wonderful time is when you come together. It's all about fellowship. It's about enjoying what God has done for us and remembering the times that he's given us and what he's done, but also is to remember and to think, well, not to remember, but to think about, to anticipate what's coming in the future, right? And so what is God going to do with us when it's all said and done? What's he going to do? He's going to dwell among us. That's what we're told in the book of Isaiah. That's what we're told in the book of Revelation, that God is going to dwell among us. And what? He's going to be our God, and we are going to be his people. That's the bottom line. That's what all of this is all about, is to dwell with God, that he would be our God and we would be his people, and to enjoy his presence, and he's going to enjoy our presence. So the Feast of Sukkot is just a dress rehearsal, remembering what happened, but also just anticipating the good times when we get to be with the Lord forever and ever and ever. And there are pleasures at his right hand forevermore. It's going to be so wonderful. So if you've never done that, I'd encourage you. In fact, if you want to start thinking about it, we are going to celebrate that by camping out at Cherry Creek Reservoir. That will be in October. So you can write to me and ask for details about that. We had a great time last year. In fact, we had to turn people away. We just didn't have enough space. It was kind of sad. But we had one person who came from New Hampshire. That was pretty exciting. Others who came from Arizona, New Mexico, and other places as well. So if you don't even live here, but you want to celebrate that with us, you're more than welcome to do that. So I'd encourage you to do that. Well, that's pretty much it, right? So Moses declared to the children of Israel the feasts of the Lord. These are God's feasts. They're amazing, amazing times. If you haven't started celebrating them, I encourage you to do so. You won't be disappointed. They're really, they're a lot of fun. Most all of them entail food, which is great. And then if they don't, well, you probably don't need it anyway. All right. Thank you, guys. So glad that you could join me. Let me just double check, make sure that there are not some questions. I think there might be here. So I want to see. Okay, this is from Federico. If genetic is the key to be perfect, how do we know that everyone does not have any traces of fallen angels? Well, Federico, I would suggest that God is in charge of that. Okay, so he's the one who knows. And if you had traces of fallen angel in you, you'd probably be acting very differently. I would just suggest that. All right. And I don't think that you can sort of get that by mistake. Like you ingest something by accident, and now you've got fallen angel DNA in you. I think that's very deliberate. Again, I talk about that in Corrupt the Image, Volume 1, 2, and 3 at great length. So check those out, okay? And I think there was one more. This is from Hawkeye. He says, since the seventh Sabbath is likely symbolic of the millennial reign, our Sabbath rest, what do the Sabbaths of the feast likely represent? Okay, so if the seventh day, what do the Sabbaths of the feast likely represent? Well, so right, Passover, right? That was a thing before Yeshua came, but then after Yeshua came, what did it do? Well, it tells us that that's the day that he died, right? So these become now not just symbolic, but very much I don't want to use the wrong word here. Fulfilled isn't the right word, but they now become tied, right? There's a connection with what Jesus did on that day. So again, he died on Passover. He was in the tomb for unleavened bread. He rose on first fruits. The Holy Spirit was given at Pentecost, Shavuot, right? So those are all big milestones of something epic that God did in the world. And so therefore, the Feast of Trumpets is very, very likely, in my opinion, that will be the day that Jesus comes back, because that will be the time of the last trumpet. The trumpet of the Lord will sound, right? All of that. That is the Feast of Trumpets. And then you have 10 days between the Feast of Trumpets and Yom Kippur. I think there will be some major fighting on planet Earth, the Battle of Armageddon specifically. Of course, Jesus wins that battle, and then he's going to establish his throne. He will set that up, and then all the nations will be brought before him. That'll be the day of Yom Kippur, when there's judgment happening. And then 5 days after that, we go into the time of Sukkot, when God dwells with us. So I don't know that they're symbolic anymore. I think they would become milestones of major events that happened in world history, and where God, really kicks some major butt. So that's what I would suggest. All right. Well, thank you guys. Love it. So glad you're here. Till next time. God bless you.